strategies because I believe that this is the single most indicting piece of documentary evidence we have provided.
And we will be looking at this evidence in detail to set the stage. We first have the initial podcast. We'll call this the Kawhi Leonard No-Show Contract Podcast that sets everything in motion. From there, we really have a bonus podcast with Mark Cuban. And now we are on this podcast. We'll call this the Dennis Wong Podcast, where we have a transfer from Dennis Wong's company. It's really an investment to Aspiration, just as the company's outlook is the most bleak. So that's where our focus is in for this episode. Let's now go to my outline and let's look at this quote one more time. I believe that this is the single most indicting piece of documentary evidence we have provided, the words of Pablo Torre. So now let's look at the outline. We are focused in on December of 2022. The company outlook was extremely bleak. In October, Andre Cherney, the co-founder, resigned. In December, we have executives and employees being laid off. And just for context, remember, it was just 1 year and 3 months prior that we have this very grand sponsorship where Aspiration agreed to pay the Clippers $300 million. They were the jersey patch for the Clippers. And now everything is starting to fall apart. And let's go back to the podcast. And let's go to 22 minutes and 50 seconds in so that we can look at the terms of Kawhi Leonard's contract.
Into bankruptcy, Kawhi's $7 million annual salary for doing absolutely nothing needed to be paid quarterly.
Right.
Okay? 4 $1.75 million installments. The first installment, $1.75 million, due in June of 22. The second, $1.75 million installment, due in September. The third, $1.75 million installment, due in December.
Okay, so now let's go back to the outline, and that's what we have here. One note is that KL2 Aspire LLC, which was Kawhi Leonard's company that he was receiving this money from, it's marked as critical. And it's worth noting that because the company was already having to lay off employees and they were having trouble making payments otherwise, but Kawhi Leonard's payment was marked as critical despite all of the problems. But continuing on, we have this $7 million annual contract that is to be paid quarterly. And the first payment was on June 30th, 2022. But I should say the first payment was to be made on June 30th, 2022. It was late. It was paid on July 6th, 2022. And then September's payment was missed. But then we have a payment that's made on December 15th, 2022. And with that, let's go back to the episode and let's play at 27:30.
In the amount of $1,999,999.59.
So $1.99 million comes in 9 days before Kawhi Leonard is scheduled to get paid amid the total collapse of the economic premise of this entire company.
All right, so that's a good start. Let's go back to the outline. We have this payment that's made. It's made 9 days before Kawhi Leonard ends up being paid out. And again, note that amount, $1,999,999.59. So 41 cents short, 41 cents short of $2 million. And then Kawhi Leonard gets paid. So this payment is made by DEA 88 Investments LP. It is their first investment into Aspiration. And as far as I can tell, and this is looking ahead into Pablo's next podcast, this is the only payment that is made from DEA 88 Investments. The reason why DEA 88 Investments is so relevant is because that company is tied to Dennis Wong. And we'll talk about Dennis Wong in a second. Here, I have some corporate entity formation information. This isn't from the Secretary of State, but it appears to be accurate. We have DEA 88 Investments LLP, and note the agent name, Dennis Wong. Also note the certificate of formation, January of 2022. I don't know if that has any significance, but this company was formed in 2022, approximately 11 months before this payment is made. But let's go back to the outline. So the registered agent again is Dennis Wong. Dennis Wong is the 1% owner of the Clippers. He is the vice chairman of the Clippers. He is Steve Ballmer's college roommate, and his daughter just so happened to be an employee of Aspiration. On her LinkedIn, Pablo relays that she was the project manager of operations and strategy. And here we also have just the information that if with Dennis Wong, he's going to be aware, likely, of Steve Ballmer's $50 million investment, and that we also have the Clippers sponsorship deal, which is, in Pablo's words, collapsing. I don't know if payments are being made or not, but they may not be given the company's situation at this time. But either way, the point of this information is that it is very likely that if we look at this just in terms of an innocent investment, let's say, and Amin brings this up, let's just say that Dennis Wong decided that he wants to be an investor in Aspiration as well. If we look at this, and in light of this information, with his daughter being an employee, with Steve Ballmer already having $50 million invested, and also the Clippers sponsorship deal, as Pablo puts it, collapsing, it doesn't make sense that this investment would be made. But we do have an investment that's made. And so there's a stock purchase agreement, and Dennis Wong's company receives 0.072% of Aspiration. And then there's the disclosure of bad facts, where the information that would tell you that this company is having trouble is revealed. So here we have the company is in default, that the independent auditor, KPMG, has resigned. We have the fact that Aspiration is facing litigation for millions of dollars. And then we also have FINRA and SEC inquiries being disclosed. The only other two investors, as Pablo reports, who invested in December of 2022 were Joe Sandberg and another board member. So the co-founder and another board member were the only ones who invested in Aspiration. So this all goes to paint the picture that it's very curious that there would be a random investment made of $2 million into Aspiration at this time. The other thing that's problematic is, we will get to in a moment, is I have it down here. What would this investment, what would a $2 million investment even do for a company that had previously raised $300 million and was a late stage startup? And so we're going to get to another aspect of here that Mark Cuban brings up, but I have a list of questions. And so these are just questions to ponder as you're thinking about, why is this payment being made? And that's the first question here. Now, Mark Cuban proposes the idea that this was a bridge loan or investment, and we'll get to that in a moment. Why not pay more? So one question I have, and this is really a neutral question. If we do have this payment, why isn't it more? Why isn't it, to cover the last two payments? Because remember, September was missed, December was owed as well. So why not cover both of those payments with this one payment? Why is this the only payment that's made from DEA 88 Investments LP? Why this payment amount? So that's also, why wouldn't this just be $2 million? It's almost conspicuous. It is conspicuous that it's not $2 million. And then again, we have the other aspect of this is that this is an investment that's being made, and it doesn't really make sense given that this is a late stage startup that has already raised $300 million, and now we're going back to this relatively small amount of $2 million. And then I have here, is the January 3rd, 2022 company formation date significant at all, or just random and it's inconsequential? But I did have this as a note. But now let's go to the Road Trippin' podcast, and here we have a Mark Cuban appearance, and this was on September. This episode was published on September 11th, as was Pablo's episode that was published, the Dennis Wong episode. But let's go ahead and play a clip.
It is anything that typically happens in the NBA, right? And this whole Dennis Wong thing, the way I see it is, these guys were losing money hand over fist in 2022. And so, lots of times I'll get emails or calls from people, and they're saying, look, Mark, I'm getting ready to raise a lot of money, but I need a bridge loan of some sort, of bridge investment to carry me over till this new money comes in. And to me, that's what happened with this Dennis Wong thing, because it's not work there. And so, okay, Richard, let's just say it's you, me, and Channing. We're negotiating a deal, and I'm the crook, right? And Rich.
All right, so I'll stop it there. The bridge investment, bridge loan doesn't really make sense because, well, for a number of reasons, but let's just look at one. They would have needed a lot more than $2 million. So if they were seeking out a bridge investment, they're going to need more money to keep operations going. And so $2 million really isn't going to make a difference there. So if we really look closely at the bridge investment, it doesn't really make sense. Also, why is Dennis Wong making the bridge investment to begin with? Why wouldn't it be anybody else? Why would it be Dennis Wong? He might have a daughter inside of Aspiration, but if he wanted, he could pay his daughter directly if he was concerned with her getting paid. Why is he trying to keep this company afloat? That doesn't really make any sense. But there's one other part of this episode, the road tripping episode, that I wanted to cover. So let's go to this now. And this will be Mark Cuban.
March of 2025. And just pay me. But the more important point is that's 2022. They didn't declare bankruptcy until March of 2025. And Kawhi kept on getting paid after that 1.75 in 2022, right? So it was $7 million a year, 1.75 every 3 months. And so, yeah, he got his 1.75 out of the 1.99 that Dennis Wong put in. But what about next year and those next 4 1.75s?
Okay, that is a good point from Mark Cuban. But of course, we know that Pablo likes to drip content. And so what happens after this is that Pablo has this next podcast episode where he does explain that there actually were additional payments that were coming into Aspiration from the Clippers. Now, this leads to one of my last questions, which is why was Dennis Wong needed this one time and then he disappears from the picture? That's really a neutral question. That doesn't have to be against the Clippers. It just doesn't, why he made this one single isolated payment doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But let's just look at the payment itself. There's not really an explanation from it. We just heard from Mark Cuban the theory of that this is a bridge loan or a bridge investment. It wouldn't make sense as one. It's not enough money to really bridge anything. It might help with operations for a few days, but this is not going to be enough, especially the way they were burning through money and all of the money that they owed out. So that doesn't make sense. But it does align it aligns very much with Kawhi Leonard getting paid, right? Because Kawhi Leonard got $1.75 million 9 days after the payment was made. And the other question I would have, again, going back to why only $2 million, and possibly that's because we can remember that Dennis Wong is not going to have nearly the net worth that Steve Ballmer is. But it just leads to more questions. But the problem is that none of those questions are really beneficial to the Clippers. When you look at this, it's at best neutral. It's at best a curious case of what's going on here. And so it's unknown why this was made, but that's the question here. This is a key question. As Pablo mentioned, this is a very significant piece of evidence, and we need to have an answer here before we can continue on. Of course, when we look at the Kawhi Leonard contract, that also invites a lot of questions. But this one is a really, really curious payment. I don't know why it went through Dennis Wong at this time, and it was only this time. This just invites more speculation. But Pablo does help shore up some of this with his next podcast episode, which we will be looking at more evidence. But for now, I wanted to focus in on this because we do have this payment being made. It's curiously made by the 1% owner, the company for the 1% owner of the Clippers. And it's hard to explain, right? And as Pablo says, I believe that this is the single most indicting piece of documentary evidence we have provided. So I will include a link to this PDF in the comment section.